From the outside, the Fishers were your all-American family. Church-going, involved with the community, and hands-on with their kids. They seemed to have it all. But when the closed doors they shielded behind quite literally blew up, and one of them goes on the run, a different story is revealed. Asking the question, will there ever be an ending to one of the FBI's longest, most wanted cases?
Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and I appreciate you joining today. If you're new to listening, please find the place where you subscribe wherever you happen to be listening right now. And when you are subscribed, you don't miss any future episodes, and your subscription is tax deductible. See, the joke is it doesn't cost anything to subscribe. Sorry, I had to explain that to Harper. And Harper is my dog, and she's asleep anyway, so she's not listening. And speaking of asleep, I think it's about time for an episode of What Joe Saw on the Internet. It's like a show within a show. It's very complicated, but I saw someone call another person woke yesterday. Like woke is some kind of demeaning insult. Woke is to be awake, right? You're fully conscious and your eyes are open. So if you're calling somebody woke meant as some sort of put down, don't do that. It doesn't mean what you think it does. And that concludes What Joe Saw on the Internet. Before we get going with the actual story today, check the show notes of this episode. You'll find the links to connect with 10-Minute Murder all over social media. I'm a very cool person, so this is something you should obviously do. Now, to today's story. Born in 1961 to parents Jan Howell and William Fisher, Robert William Fisher was one of 3 children. Moving from New York to Arizona, Robert had an idyllic early childhood by all accounts. But in 1976, when Robert was 15 years old, his parents divorced. Though it's not uncommon in today's society, watching his parents split seemed to hit Robert pretty hard, and the consequences of this affected his adult life, especially when he would eventually become a parent himself. Robert graduated in 1979 and immediately enlisted in the U.S. Navy. In 1982, after a rejection from joining the Navy SEALs, he left and found work as a firefighter in San Diego County. In 1987, Robert married Mary Cooper, a deeply religious family-oriented woman. The couple would soon put down roots together in Scottsdale, Arizona, close to where her family lived, and went on to have 2 children together, Bobby and Brittany. While his public-facing persona was that of a loving father and husband who was very active with the church and community, Robert was by no means an easy man to live with. Mary's family would later describe how she became a yes sir wife who was treated poorly by her husband. Robert's deep trauma over his parents' divorce and humiliation at his failed military career meant that he would take every opportunity to undermine and control his wife and children, believing that they were his property. Of course, this would only come out years later with friends and family believing that Robert was a stand-up guy, with Mary's father later saying, quote, "We never knew a thing. She didn't want mommy and daddy to know anything she was going through. She just took care of those 2 precious kids." And take care of them she did. Mary's sole goal in life was to be a mother, and she was devoted to her children. Cracks began to appear just 7 years after Bobby was born. In 1998, Robert started neglecting his duties within the church, regularly failing to make an appearance at service with the rest of the family. He contracted a UTI after cheating on Mary with the sex worker and desperately tried to cover the infection and cause of it from his wife. At the same time he was treating her horribly, he was adamant he would never make his parents' mistakes and have his marriage end up in divorce. They would take up marriage counseling together with the church's pastor, but didn't seem to get any further with resolving their issues. Neighbors would hear them arguing about sex and money constantly. Later, Robert's friends reported that by 2001, he was just acting completely strange. Robert had always been an avid outdoorsman with a passion for hunting, and while on a trip, his friends later reported that he had killed an elk and reveled in smearing its blood all over his face. On another occasion, he crept up behind a family and emptied his gun into the air just to scare them. His hunting friends later reported that Robert was having worries over losing his family and would voice them to his peers, saying, Quote, he couldn't live without his family. And it's around this time that Mary had expressed to friends that she had had enough, and she wanted to end her marriage for the sake of the children. It's possible that she also told Robert this, and still traumatized from his parents' divorce, realized he was losing his grasp over his family and reality. On the 9th of April, 2001, the day started out as normal for the family. Robert, working as a respiratory therapist at the Mayo Clinic, left the house to go to work. Leaving earlier than normal, he would pick up his daughter from school just after 3:30 p.m. to attend a ceremony where she was to receive an award for her efforts in school. But he rushed her out of the event before she was even able to receive her award. Neighbors heard Robert and Mary arguing long into the evening that night, screaming at each other for hours until around 10 p.m. when suddenly the house went quiet. It's then that it's believed that Robert William Fisher began to annihilate his entire family, murdering them in cold blood, one by one. Mary died first, slashing her throat and shooting her execution style to ensure that she was dead. Next, he crept into the bedrooms of his sleeping children, slitting their throats from ear to ear. Once he knew they were dead, he began a twisted plot to cover up his crimes, dousing the house in gasoline before cutting the home's natural gas line. He lit a single candle and left, taking his dog, Blue, in their SUV, giving himself a head start. At 8:42 a.m. the next day, the home with his dead wife and dead children inside exploded. And when I say exploded, I mean the force of it rattled the entire neighborhood like an earthquake. Firefighters were quick on the scene, desperately trying to avert the fire from spreading. When they were eventually able to enter the home, they found the charred remains of Mary, Bobby, and Brittany. Robert had set the scene to look like an accident, hoping that the fire would do away with any evidence of the murders. He was on the run. Police quickly, though, pieced together the events that took place after they saw CCTV footage that placed him withdrawing $280 at a gas station nearby, driving Mary's SUV. Just 4 days later, Robert William Fisher was named as the only person of interest in the 3 homicides. The chase was on to locate him and bring him to justice. Hundreds of leads poured in from people believing that they had seen him in different locations throughout the country, but none of them went anywhere. Robert was your average-looking American that had what was later described as an everyman face. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. The last definitive evidence found in the case surfaced just 10 days after the explosion, when searchers looking in Tonto National Forest found Mary's Toyota and, more disturbingly, Blue, Robert's 2-year-old Queensland Heeler. The dog was found on the brink of death, starving and agitated. He had to be sedated in order to safely remove him from the spot under the car. Little physical evidence aside from this was found except for human feces. Police obviously searched the area, but no sign of Robert was found. And to this day, Robert has still not been found. He was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted lists on June 29, 2002, with a reward of $100,000 offered for the information leading to his arrest. There have been numerous false sightings over the years that led nowhere, but one sticks out the most. In February 2004, a man closely resembling Robert was arrested in Canada on suspicion of being the Annihilator. The unidentified man not only looked like Robert, but had the same scarring and missing teeth as him. However, on further investigation, his fingerprints didn't match and he was released. In April 2016, age-progressed images of Robert were released in hopes that even after all these years, someone may recognize the man in the images and report it. Nevertheless, the search for Robert William Fisher is still ongoing. He was taken off the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list in late 2021, with the FBI citing that he no longer fit the criteria, but reassured the public that the search for Robert will still continue. Theories online run from the wild to the widely accepted, with people believing that Robert ran off, started a whole new life in a different country, and is still living among us with a new identity. But with the limited cash and what we know of him, it's unlikely that he had the resources to pull this off. People speculate that he's still out there. The avid hunter that he was, has he been living off the grid this entire time, disconnected from reality and paying the price for his crimes with years of isolation instead? If you're asking me, I think Robert probably killed himself shortly after the murders. And people may contest this with but a narcissist wouldn't commit suicide. Yeah, they would. People said the same thing about Brian Laundrie, and look where he ended up. Wherever he is or isn't, one thing everybody can pretty much agree on is that Robert William Fisher deserves whatever he gets in his afterlife. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for being a part of it today. And before you go, subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Follow on YouTube as well. All the places on social media, you'll find all those links in the show notes of this episode. If you have a case that you think I should cover, you can slide into my DMs. Appropriately slide into my DMs or send me an email, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. And finally, there's been some controversy that I think needs to be settled, and I've been asked for my expert opinion to weigh in on this. There are very obviously more wheels than doors, and if you think otherwise, you're higher than gas. Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Be safe and make good choices.